Hello again and welcome back to our course on Word 2019. We're now down to section 9 and module 1. And what I really want to do in this first module is really just explain what sectioning is. And I want you to think about it in this way. If you think about a document that has multiple pages and you maybe want to have different margins in different parts of the document than in others, you can only achieve that if you create sections. Another example might be if you have a document in front of you that's in portrait, which is the default, and then maybe you want a specific page to be landscape only. Again, you would achieve that by putting in section breaks. And we're going to do some of these examples in the following modules. But first of all, to really illustrate what I'm talking about when it comes to sections, I have this little example on the screen here. So if you can imagine, we have 3 pages of a document. So the first one here, which has title in the middle. Then we have our second page just here. And then finally our third page. Now on this first page, I might just want to have a title. So maybe it's some kind of cover page where I just have a title in there. And what I might want to do is put in a next page section break. And there are a number of different kinds of section break, as you'll see. So this first one, next page section break, will allow me to just put a title on the page. And then instead of pressing the enter key to get to the bottom of the page and jump to the next one, I can just put in a quick section break or a next page section break, and it will give me a new page. And essentially, this will become section 1 of my document. Onto the second page, this is a slightly different scenario. So on the second page, what I want to have is the title running across the top, which is essentially in one column because the title is centered. And then I want to have 2 columns of text below. Now, if I didn't put a section break underneath the title, when I started typing my text, it's just going to be still in one column. If I decided to change the entire page to 2 columns, my title is going to move across and be shoved into this first column. So to achieve the effect I want, I've put in what we call a continuous section break, which means it's going to stay on the same page, unlike the first section break we did, which jumps us to the next page. And then I can put my columns in the new section. And you can see here, this means that this page is divided up into section 2 at the top, and then section 3 after we've put in our section break. And then finally, our third page has a different orientation. So you can see here, the first 2 pages are in portrait mode, and the third page is in landscape. So maybe I want to put in a large picture or maybe some kind of diagram, and it's going to work better if that page is in landscape. Again, if I didn't have any section breaks in this document and I switched this page to landscape, it means the whole document would turn to landscape, and I don't want that. I just want the third page as landscape. So I've put in here at the bottom of the second page a next page section break. And I can then switch the third page to landscape and it won't affect the other 2. And this then essentially becomes section 4. So hopefully that gives you an overview of how you can utilize section breaks in a document and why they're really, really useful when it comes to your layout. Obviously, we're going to go into this in a little bit more, and in the next module, we're going to actually do this. We're going to do a practice exercise. So please now join me for that. Hello again, this is Deb and welcome back to our course on Word 2019. We're down to module 2 of section 9, and in the previous module we took a look at exactly what sectioning is and why it's useful to you when you're working on your documents. Now in this module I want to put that into practice so you really get a good idea of how you can utilize sections to section up your document and have different things going on in different parts of your document. So let's just take a look at this document that we have on the screen. So I have a title, Smith Properties Inc., and then I have a subtitle, and then I have some paragraphs of text underneath. You'll also note that I have a footer and also a header on this document as well. We'll scroll down to the second page where I just have some more paragraphs of text, And on the third and final page, I have a picture, which as you can see at the moment isn't fitting too well on the page, but obviously we're going to deal with that as we go through this module. So let's scroll all the way back up to the first page. And I'm just going to click anywhere on this first page, and I just want to draw your attention down to the bottom left-hand corner, where you can see it says we have page 1 of 3, and we are in section 1. Now, if for some reason you can't see this section information, if you just right-click your mouse on the status bar, you'll be able to turn that off and on just by selecting this section button just here. You'll see if I click it again, my section information disappears from the bottom left-hand corner. Click it again and it turns it on. So just make sure that you have that turned on, because that's going to be really useful as we work through this module. So now we're going to section up this document, and what I'm trying to achieve with this first page is I don't want to have a header and footer on the first page, but I do just want to have that title and the subtitle, and I want the rest of this text to begin on page 2. So we're going to achieve that by using sections. Now you might be thinking I could just click after where we have "We'll find the right property for you" and put in a page break, which will essentially push all of the rest of this information onto the next page, but that's not going to create sections. So I want to use a section break just here. So I'm going to jump up to the layout ribbon, and I'm going to go to this breaks drop down. And you'll see the bottom half of this drop down, it says section breaks, and there are a number of different section breaks that we can utilize. So for this one, I actually do want to push all of that text down onto the next page. So I'm going to use the next page section break. And you can see there, it says insert section break and start the new section on the next page. Now remember, when you click on this, it's going to insert the break wherever your cursor currently is in your document. So really important to make sure that you're clicked in the right spot. So I'm going to click it. And there we go. So if I scroll back up, you'll see now that I just have my title and my subtitle on that first page, and the rest of the information has been pushed down to page 2. So let me just click my mouse on the first page again, and just note in the bottom left-hand corner it says section 1. Now if I scroll down to page 2 and click anywhere in the text, you'll see it says section 2. So that's how I know that I now have 2 sections in my document. Again, if you want to see where those breaks actually are, remember just to turn on your non-printing characters by using that show hide command. So you can see there, section break, next page. So I'm just going to turn that off again because I don't need it right now. Now, one other thing I want to do here is I want to make sure that this subheading doesn't wrap around. So I essentially want it all on one line. Now, there are a couple of ways I could do that. I mean, I could change the font size, which would probably achieve the desired effect. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually change the width of the margins. So I'm going to make the margins slightly narrower, which will give this subheading a little bit more room to breathe. Now remember, we can do this and not affect the rest of the document because we're working in section 1. So it's only going to affect section 1 as long as we have that option specified. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to go up to the layout ribbon. I'm going to go to the margins drop down, and I'm going to say custom margins. And you can see I have 3 tabs here, and this allows me to modify the space I have on the top, the left, the bottom, and the right. So I want to modify the left and right margins, so I'm going to change these to 0.25, and the same here, 0.25. Now, once you've changed those, this is a really important point to note. If you glance down at the bottom where it says apply to, it's defaulted to this section because Word recognizes that I now have sections in my document. So I could choose from this point forward or whole document to change the margins on everything, but I actually only want to change the margins on section 1. So I'm going to click on OK. And there we go. I now have all of that subheading on one line. Now, one final thing I want to do here is I want to go back into that page setup box. So I'm going to click the little drop down here as that's the quickest way to get to it. And I want to go to the layout tab. And what I want to actually achieve is I want to center this title and subtitle vertically on this page. And you'll see there under the page section, we have a vertical alignment option, which is currently set to top. So I'm just going to change that to center and click on OK. And there we go. I now have my title page perfectly aligned. Now the final thing I want to do to tidy up this section is I want to remove the header and footer. Because this is just a front cover page, it doesn't necessarily look as professional with the header and footer in there. I don't, however, want to remove them off of any of the other pages. So I'm going to double click in my header and footer. And if you remember from before, we have this option here, different first page. So I'm going to select it and I'm going to remove my header and I'm going to click close header and footer. So now I no longer have my header or my footer on the first page, but they're still there on that second page. And also note that the margins on the second page, or in the second section I should say, are as they were at the beginning, whereas on the first page we have much narrower margins. So you can see there very simply that we've been able to make changes just to a specific part of the document, just to that first section, without affecting anything else. Now let's move on and deal with section 2. So I'm going to scroll down. Now what I'm going to do on this second page is, first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a quick title in here. So I'm going to say Smith Properties Inc. Now what I'm trying to achieve on this page is I want the majority of this text to look like a newsletter, so I want to put it into columns. However, I don't want the Smith Properties Inc. title to be in a column. So how can I achieve that? Well, I can add in another section to section off this bottom part from About Us downwards. So I'm going to click my mouse in front of the A. Remember again, it's very important where you're clicked. I'm going to go back to Layout. I'm going to go to breaks. Now this time I'm not going to use the next page break because I don't want to actually push this text onto the next page. I want it to stay on the same page but just add a section break in there. And to do that, if you want to keep it on the same page, we're going to put in a section break continuous. And now with my cursor still clicked where it is, I'm going to go to columns and I'm going to say 2 columns. And as you can see there, it's now put in my text in a 2-column layout for that particular section. Now I'm clicked in section 3, you can see that from the bottom left hand corner. If I click on Smith Properties, you'll see that it changes to section 2. So I have 2 different sections going on in here. So what that means is basically I can take my title and I can apply some formatting to it. So I'm going to move it into the center. I'm going to make it a bit bigger. And again, let's do something like put a border around it. So I'm going to go for a 3D box border. I'm going to make it a darker blue and we're going to change the width to something a little bit thicker and click on OK. And let's also do a fill as well. Why not, while we're here? So let's do a light blue fill and click on OK. So essentially that title is still in 1 column. Then we've got our next section where we have the rest of the document in 2 columns. That's another way that you can utilize section breaks. So now let's scroll down to page 3. And again, you can see here we still have our columns going on, which is absolutely fine. However, this bit here looks a little bit lost where it says Home Office. Now this piece of text is actually kind of related to this picture. So I really want to have this piece of text on the same page as this picture. So again, this is where I can utilize my section breaks. So I'm going to click in front of Home Office. I'm going to go to Layout. I'm going to go to Breaks. Now this time I do want to push it down onto the next page. So I'm going to say Next Page Section Break. And there we go. So now I'm in section 4, but you can see that I still have my columns applied here. So now I'm in a different section. I can just switch this back to 1 column. And you'll see that it doesn't affect anything above because we're working in a completely different section. Again, if I click above, you can see section 3. If I click here, you can see section 4. The final thing I want to deal with here is this picture. Now this picture is clearly a little bit too big for this page. So what I might want to do is change the orientation of page 4 from portrait, which it's currently in, to landscape. Now obviously when I switch this to landscape, I don't want the rest of my document to switch to landscape. But because I have that section break in there, and if I just turn on show hide markers again, I've got my section break. Anything I do in this section isn't going to affect the previous sections. So I'm going to go to Layout, I'm going to go to Orientation, and I'm going to select Landscape. And you can see it's flipped that page around, but the rest of the document is still in portrait mode, which is perfect. Now, one thing you will notice is that it's pushed that image down onto the next page, and the image does still look a little bit large, although it does have a little bit more room. So I'm just going to pull this image in very slightly, like so. And you can see, there we go, it's jumped up. So you might have to do some fiddling around, but it certainly looks a lot better than if I was trying to squeeze that image onto a portrait page. So there we go, we've managed to take our document, we've sectioned it up into 4 independent sections, and we've applied changes to each section which don't affect the rest of the document. So that's a very quick overview of how sections work. Next, I want to talk to you about working with odd and even sections, so please join me for that. Hello again, this is Deb and welcome back to our course on Word 2019. We're down in section 9 in module 3 where we're going to talk about working with odd and even section breaks. Now, we've already talked about the importance of creating sections in a document to have something different happening in one part of a document to another. And we've gone through some examples of that. So we've split a document up into sections and we've made different changes, such as decreasing the margins in one section, changing the amount of columns in another, and also changing the orientation of a page in a different section. Now let's take this further and talk about when you're looking at your section breaks, you can actually put in different even and odd page section breaks. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to insert a section break and start the new section on the next even page number or the next odd page number, whichever one you want to choose. Now, the sort of scenario where you might find this would be in books, so chapters, for example. So you've probably seen it in a book where the left page might be blank and the right page is the beginning of a new chapter. So that kind of utilizes this odd and even section break functionality. So what Word will essentially do is if the section break falls on an odd page, it will leave the intervening even number page blank. So let me show you what I mean by that. Now I'm down on page 2 in section 3. I'm just going to click my mouse in front of where it says Smith Properties Inc. in the title. I'm going to go up to my layout ribbon and down to breaks, and I'm going to select odd page, and you can see there it says insert a section break and start the new section on the next odd numbered page. So I'm going to click, and you can see that it's pushed all of that down onto page 3, which is an odd numbered page. And what it's essentially done is it's left the preceding even number page blank. Now obviously something's been left at the top there which I can just go in and delete out, but hopefully you can see how that works. And as I said, it's the kind of thing that you'll see for chapters in books. So it really is just as simple as that. Now we've come to the end of this section. Hopefully all of that's given you a little bit more of an idea as to how to section up your documents. What I want you to do next is to flip over to the practice exercise, and then we'll move on to section 10. So I will see you over there. Hello again and welcome back to our course on Word 2019. We're now down to the section 9 practice exercise where I'm going to get you to use all of the skills that you've learnt on sectioning. So the first thing I'd like you to do is to open the file called Sections Practice. I'd like you to create a next page section break after the subtitle so that the title and subtitle are on page 1 and in section 1. I'd like you to center the title and subtitle vertically on page 1. And I want you to create 2 columns down in section 2. I'd then like you to create a next page section break before the heading Premium Listings. And then I'd like you to make section 3 Landscape. You can then save and close the file. And that is it for this practice exercise, hopefully not too painful. I will see you in the next section.